Welcome to the Lord of the Rings Lorecast, the show that explores the background of Tolkien's amazing world from the very beginning. I'm sure it wouldn't surprise anybody to say something like, J.R.R. Tolkien is a master storyteller. We've all been talking about his stories for quite a while now on this show, and I would have to imagine that most of you would agree with that, if not all of you, and for many different reasons. The reasons that you hear most often include things like his ability to design a world with a rich and interesting history, or his ability to create languages and cultures and whole entire civilizations that seemingly rise and fall. The way that he works in the mystical and the magical, the fantastic and the fairy, into the real and the mundane. But one of the things you don't hear as often is his ability to simply tell a story in a way that guides the reader through the story comfortably, with little glimpses of foreshadowing, character development, and the small plot points that anticipate the bigger picture. My point is that we hear so often about the broad brushstrokes, the big images and the big ideas that influenced writers continually through to today. But we don't hear as much about the small details. And in the second chapter of The Hobbit, at least at the beginning of this chapter, it is all about these small details. It's all about continuing the development of these characters who were just introduced, giving us a glimpse into who they are, how they're beginning to change, and then on top of that, an understanding of what this adventure is going to be like. He hints at all of these things, and he brings our perspective zoomed in to these little details in order to enrich a much bigger story. So let's get into it. Chapter 2, Roast Mutton. So you might be wondering, what is mutton? Mutton, M-U-T-T-O-N. It is the flesh of a lamb that's at least 3 years old. Anything younger than that would be considered a sheep. These are things that I think most of us in the modern world don't really think about very often, unless you happen to be in livestock or the food industry. And I know in my experience, which is probably fairly similar to yours, that roast mutton is not a dish you see on many menus. It's not something that's very popular in today's world, but I have a feeling that if you go back, almost 100 years to the writing, 80 something years, almost 90 years, to the writing of The Hobbit, that this is probably something that was more commonly understood, especially in places like the UK. But it's not particularly popular, and some people would say it's a delicious dish, but most of us would go, it's on the edge of something I may not even want to try. It's an interesting name for a title, and I think it has some ramifications. I think it gives us a glimpse into what we're going to be seeing here with Bilbo and his separation from not just his Baggins side versus the Took side, which we've talked about a lot. The Baggins side being the more civilized side, and the Took being a little bit more adventurous and a little bit more out there. But also the fact that he's now leaving civilization. He's off on the adventure. And the story starts with him waking up in the morning and putting on his dressing gown, another phrase that you don't hear very often, at least not in my circles. It basically means like a robe, like a house robe or a bathrobe, something that you would put on over top of the rest of your clothes for modesty, especially if there's company around or something like that, so that you don't have to change your clothes. You can just wrap yourself in a gown, or a robe, as we would more commonly call it today. And he walks out. Both surprised that the dwarves, who had been so helpful cleaning up, left a bit of a mess in their early morning breakfast. Also surprised that he hadn't been awoken either by the commotion or by the dwarves coming to get him to let him know that they were leaving. He's a little bit disappointed. And this feeling, it says, surprised him. Already, the Took side is starting to peek out in chapter 2. And then, of course, he talks himself down and says, thinking of dragons and all that outlandish nonsense at your age, meaning that would be ridiculous because he calls himself a fool for having those thoughts. And then he starts breakfast. He starts cleaning up. He starts a second breakfast. And this is the first time that we get a glimpse of an actual Hobbit meal, a second breakfast, something that nobody else has ever heard of before. At least all of these other races and peoples of this world don't have second breakfasts. They have normal meals like the rest of us, or at least that's what we're supposed to be assuming here, because it comes across comedic. And I think that was probably one of the reasons for including their weird meal schedule. There are a few reasons, actually. First of all, it makes them unique. Secondly, it shows that they are people of comfort, that they basically snack all day. And that means that being out on an adventure where meals are less readily available would be a considerable difference from their normal lives, something they'd have to get used to, or Bilbo would have to get used to. And third, I think it's humorous. I think it's one of those things that if you tell a child while reading this book, they'll go, second breakfast? What's that? That's silly. That kind of thing. And then, as he's having second breakfast, and he's got the windows and the doors open, we're told that it's a nice warm breeze out today, Gandalf comes by. Gandalf, what is he doing here? And he says, my dear fellow, whenever are you going to come? What about an early start? And here you're having breakfast, or whatever you call it, at 10:30. They left you a message because they could not wait. So Gandalf is sent back, or chooses to go back, to check on him. Gandalf also, and let's put the pieces together here, did not wake him early even though he was awake and the dwarves were awake. He let Bilbo sleep in on purpose. And then we find out that they left Bilbo a message. And Bilbo says, a message, and he gets all flustered. And then Gandalf says, great elephants, which I think is another humorous point. Also notice, he doesn't say oliphants, he says elephants. And we know from The Lord of the Rings that oliphants are like gigantic elephant-like creatures that can be found to the east or the south. But that means that elephants actually exist in this world as well. And it's humorous to say great elephants. Maybe I should put that on a shirt. Gandalf's face saying great elephants. So he says, you are not at all yourself this morning. You have never dusted the mantelpiece. Now, I find this line particularly interesting. How does Gandalf know what Bilbo's morning habits are? I mean, I guess you could say that he would assume that Bilbo would clean up after his guests and give the house a nice cleaning, including the mantelpiece. But what I think is more likely implied here is that Bilbo seems to have a morning routine where he goes around the house and dusts and kind of puts things back in their places just in case, because he's the respectable type. And Bilbo defends himself, talking about how he had to clean up for 14 people and all of that. And we find out that they left a note under the clock on the mantelpiece. And this I also find particularly interesting. The note was not left in a place where Bilbo would obviously go see it, although Gandalf implies that he should have. If you were to leave a note for Bilbo in the situation that the dwarves were in, would you have chosen under the clock on the mantelpiece? Or would you more likely have slid it under his bedroom door, or put it right on the counter in the kitchen where he would obviously be going for his breakfast in the morning? No, it's as if this note was placed somewhere where it could be found, but not right away. It's as if Gandalf is up to something with this. But here, let's take a look at the note. Let's read the whole thing and hear what it says. Thorin and company to Burglar Bilbo. Greeting. Burglar Bilbo. They are using the official title of why he would be employed by them. For your hospitality, our sincerest thanks. So they're being pleasant. Thank you for your hospitality. And for your offer of professional assistance, our grateful acceptance. Basically, you're hired. Terms, not here are the terms, just matter of fact, terms. These are the terms. Cash on delivery. Okay, you get paid when everything's done. Up to and not exceeding 1/14 of total profits, if any. Now, this is interesting on both ends of this. It starts with up to and not exceeding. So you would get a 14th because there's 14 of us. We're going to divide it evenly. Up to 14th. You're not guaranteed a 14th. You're guaranteed up to a 14th. This is giving him a maximum number, but not a minimum number. And then it follows up on the end and says total profits, if any. Meaning they could go on this adventure and fail, so the dwarves are not ensuring that they're going to pay him anything. It's on him as a risk. If at the end they don't get what they were going for, sorry, you don't get paid because they didn't make anything. All traveling expenses guaranteed in any event. I find this kind of humorous. All traveling expenses. I guess that means he doesn't have to worry about food and drink on the road or a horse or a pony or whatever. We'll get to that in a little bit. They'll be riding around on any of those things or places to stay, which we will soon find are few and far between. And then this next line is particularly interesting. Funeral expenses to be defrayed by us or our representatives. Who are your representatives? I guess that could mean others who end up in charge of the treasure that they find, the kingdom that they reforge, if most of the dwarves don't make it. And also, it brings up funeral expenses, implying that this is not a safe endeavor. And if he dies, well, they'll take care of it. If occasion arises and the matter is not otherwise arranged for. So basically, we'll figure it out. Thinking it unnecessary to disturb your esteemed repose, we have proceeded in advance to make requisite preparations and shall await your respected person at the Green Dragon Inn, Bywater, at 11 a.m. sharp, trusting that you will be punctual. We have the honor to remain yours deeply, Thorin and Co. or Company. I love that the name of the inn is the Green Dragon because they're off on an adventure to fight a red dragon. Kind of a fun little bookend there. Also, the fact that they are requesting that he be punctual but still haven't woken him up. Still kind of funny. Still kind of odd. And I think there's a reason for that. I think there's a reason why the dwarves and Gandalf did not wake him up, for why they put this note in a place where he would not come across it right away. Also, why they didn't clean up very well. That seems against their character. We saw in the previous chapter that they were very helpful when cleaning up. And although they were a little bit rough and rowdy in ways that were potentially unnerving to Bilbo, they weren't poor guests. They were helpful. They were courteous. So maybe there's a reason why they didn't clean up as much as they did. We're told that they were in a hurry to get to where they were going in order to prepare for the journey, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But maybe it's also because cleaning up would have created a lot of noise. The clanking of dishes and glasses, the moving of chairs scooting around the room. This potentially would have woken Bilbo up. But I think Gandalf, in that situation, was probably the one who said, "Go on now. You all need to go get ready. Prepare for the adventure. I'll take care of the rest." I have a feeling Gandalf's to blame for what appears to be the dwarves' lack of consideration for their host. I don't think it's the dwarves' fault. And then we get even more of a sense of this The first thing Gandalf says after reading that letter, and you would expect Bilbo would complain. He would say something about traveling expenses or a 14th of his share up to, wait, what do you mean by that? Or potentially funeral expenses being included. It seems like there are a number of things in this note that Bilbo would take issue with. And so Gandalf changes the conversation. He says, that leaves you just 10 minutes. You will have to run. And then Bilbo says, but, and then Gandalf cuts him off and says, no time for it. And then Bilbo says, but again. And then Gandalf says, no time for that either. Off you go, which I think is, of course, a humorous little thing added in here. But it also, I think, shows you that Gandalf can predict what Bilbo will say. I wouldn't be surprised if the things that were about to come after the buts were things that Gandalf already anticipated Bilbo would mention. And he cuts him off and says, don't worry about that, just go. This entire situation, not just the dwarves showing up at his house, but the entire morning so far, has been constructed by Gandalf in order to manipulate Bilbo into making this decision. And that sounds kind of shady, and sometimes Gandalf goes to these extremes in order to make happen things that he thinks absolutely need to happen. And what he's doing here is he's giving the Took inside Bilbo the opportunity to act before the Baggins holds him back. And I think that's actually really smart and really good writing. All right, we need to go thank our patrons. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. It's time for that spring reset. I'm taking a look at everything in my closet and figuring out that, oh no, this absolutely needs to go. And it's about time I replace things so that my clothes aren't older than my 15-year-old. Now you might think that they lasted that long because they were well made, but no, they're in terrible condition. Unlike the new jeans I just got from Quince. Jeans have always been my personal go-to because you can kind of wear them for lots of different things, but maybe they're not your thing. Maybe you're looking for, 100% European linen with insanely soft flow knit activewear fabric. It's definitely getting warmer, and their flow knit activewear is moisture wicking, anti-odor, and soft enough that you'll actually want to wear it every day. So pick out what you want. You can't go wrong because they have prices 50 to 60% less than similar brands. And like I said before, they are high quality. I continue to wear their clothes all the time, and I know that these new jeans are going to last me a lot better than the other things in my wardrobe. And on top of it, they look great. They're so comfortable, and I spent just as much on the jeans that I am now cleaning out of my wardrobe. So if you're looking for something better, just all around better, go check out Quince. So go do it right now. Refresh your wardrobe with Quince. Go to quince.com/ringslore for free shipping and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. Go to quince.com/ringslore for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/ringslore. Welcome to the middle of this episode. We have some new patrons, or at least one new patron to welcome. Ross W., thank you for joining us. If you are interested in getting ad-free episode and bonus episodes every week, we've been going over things like Hobbit names and the lineage of Thorin and all sorts of other cool stuff over on the Patreon. Head over to patreon.com/LOTR Lorecast. Check out all the different stuff you can get for supporting the show. Also, I'm still in the process of working on some new t-shirts that should get rolled out in about a month. So if you're interested in being a part of this and getting t-shirts and stickers and stuff like that, it's a great way to do that as well. Also, I have to shout out our VIP patrons. Let's go through the list and try and knock this out as quick as I can. AK Music Lover, Apollo, Aragorn III, Alte Morton, Austin C, Azel Razzle, Barney D, Bo, Black Squirrel, Brandy D, Cutter Metalworks, Daniel Nightweaver, David S, David M, Divine Madman, Fulcrum, Gimli a Break, Gemma D, Jesse P, Jezer, Katie S, Capenna, Lori B, Mason Weathertop, Nick K, Nostrils of Sauron, Richard J, Rivqua, Rosie Rose, Sam B, Seju, TJT, and Tour Son of Hooer. Thank you so much for all of your support. Also, if you'd like to help out the show other ways, of course, you guys have heard this a million times, but leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcast is super helpful, and I'll read those out on a future episode. episode. You can also rate the show on Spotify or anywhere else, or share it with your friends. And with the Rings of Power coming up in roughly a month from like tomorrow, I think, we're probably going to get a number of new listeners. So if you are tuning in from the future somewhere because you found the show, because you got interested because of the Rings of Power, welcome. I'm so glad that you are here. I hope you're enjoying it. All right, we've got more of chapter 2 in The Hobbit. Obviously, we're not going to finish the entire chapter, but we've got more to talk about. So let's go do that. So my theory is that Gandalf has manufactured all of this in order to get Bilbo past the inertia, the Baggins inertia. Let's just call it that. Sounds like a new physics thing for galaxies moving across the sky or something. I don't know. But the Baggins inertia that would have kept him back and wondering is this too dangerous? What if this happens? That sort of thing. And he just pushes him out the door, basically. He sends him out, and I love this passage. To the end of his days, Bilbo could never remember how he found himself outside, without a hat, a walking stick, or any money, or anything that he usually took when he went out. Gandalf was so effective that he sent him out of the door without basically just the things that he was currently wearing. And remember, hobbits don't wear shoes, so he didn't have to stop and put on his shoes either. He just went out the door, leaving his second breakfast half finished and quite unwashed up, pushing his keys into Gandalf's hands. And I find that particularly interesting. Not only did he leave breakfast on the table, which clearly, after some months of being gone, would have been eaten by vermin that may have found their way into his house, but he also gives Gandalf his keys. He doesn't even lock up behind him. He leaves Gandalf there as basically a way to lock up the house so that he could get to the dwarves in time. This is how much he trusts Gandalf already. And I love how we can get a sense of how quick Bilbo can move here, because it says, running as fast as his furry feet could carry him down the lane, past the great mill, across the water, and then on for a mile or more. He has 10 minutes to get where he's going, and yet runs at least a mile, if not more. Can you imagine pudgy little Bilbo with his short little legs doing what is implied to be at least like a 7 or 8 minute mile plus a little bit more? He was hauling it. He was moving as fast as he could. And then we get this fun little line. Very puffed he was. Very puffed. Another phrase that we don't use very often. I'm assuming this means out of breath, which clearly you would be. He's a middle-aged hobbit running as fast as he can. And then he finds out that he's without his pocket handkerchief, which is, again, another little nod. It's supposed to be funny, I think, but it's also a little nod at the comforts of home and the Baggins side of him. And the first of the dwarves to welcome him is Balin. I find this interesting. I think it sets Balin up to be memorable in some ways, and also kind of the emotional center of the dwarves in a sort of way. He says, bravo. He's clearly happy that Bilbo showed up and was maybe not sure that he would. And then the rest of them come around the corner, all on ponies. They were on ponies, and each pony was slung about with all kinds of baggages, packages, parcels, and paraphernalia, which all feel like synonyms for basically the same thing. Again, I think a point of humor. And they'd even gotten a small little pony for Bilbo. And then Thorin immediately, he doesn't even say welcome. He just says, up you two get, and off we go. He's all business. And then Bilbo apologizes and talks about how he doesn't have his hat or his handkerchief or anything like that. I didn't even read your note until 10:45 to be precise. And Dwalin says, don't be precise and don't worry. This is an interesting combination of phrases, I think. The second part, I think, is easier to understand, or at least comes more easily to us as readers today. Basically, he's saying, don't worry about it. It's fine. You made it. But the first part, don't be precise. Maybe what he's implying is, don't be so stuck up. Don't be so rigid. Relax a little bit. Whatever the tone of this, it's friendly, even though it seems to be shooting down something that Bilbo just said. And on top of that, he says, oh, well, I've got a spare hood and cloak in my luggage. Don't worry about your hat. And Bilbo puts it on, and we're told that it's too big for him. It's weather-stained. It's this dark green color, and that Bilbo's father, Bungo, well, Bilbo wonders what exactly he would have thought of him. And I think this is the first we will see a visual change in who Bilbo is. All of The Hobbit is a character arc for Bilbo, where he goes from being, or at least thinking, that he's supposed to be Baggins-like, to understanding who he really is. The balance between the two sides of his ancestry and his wants. He has been denying his want for adventure. He's been denying a part of himself that he has been pushing deep down inside. And we're going to see that emerge not just in his actions and his attitude, but also in the way he looks. This is the beginning of a visual transformation. Even though the cloak is too big, the hood looks silly and floppy on his head, he is beginning to change. And in all of this, he was comforted that he wouldn't be mistaken for a dwarf because he doesn't have a beard. He's still hung up on the appearances of things, what other people might think of him. These are all keeping him from being his true self. Then Gandalf shows up. Clearly he took care of the house, and he even brought pocket handkerchiefs and Bilbo's pipe and tobacco, some comforts from home, because Gandalf knows that he's going to take some time to work his way in to this new life that he's moving into, this new perspective on himself even. And as they leave, we get some other interesting bits of details here. They're happy to be traveling. They're singing songs. The day feels nice. It's a warm, nice day in May. They travel on what appears to be all of this one day and make it past the lands that Bilbo is familiar with. All of a sudden, people are singing songs that he hasn't heard before and talking with funny accents, and yet they've only been traveling for this one day. Maybe you could make an argument for this just kind of fast forwards over multiple days, but I don't think the text implies that. I think it implies that it's still the same day. And then they go into the hills, away from the more regularly repaired roads and the places that seem civilized. They're moving from civilization out into the wilds. We're told that there will be less inns, places to stay. And on top of that, things immediately begin to change. The day starts beautifully. Nice breezes, sunny weather. And as they transition from civilization to the wilds, the weather also transitions from comfortable to uncomfortable, rainy and wet and cold. On top of that, they see some evil-looking castles built by wicked people, which I have to assume were either constructed by or corrupted by the Lich King centuries before. And all of this uncomfortableness really starts to bother Bilbo. He starts to wonder about burgling and thinks about his nice hole in his fire, the kettle beginning to sing. The Took side got him this far, but the Baggins side is saying, you know, you could just go back. There's still time to get out of this. But they continue on. They reach this ancient stone bridge, and the river is, of course, swollen with the rains. And I love that the imagery here is not modern stuff, ancient castles, stone bridges, places that are not being maintained the same way as the civilized land of Hobbiton. And this whole time, the dwarves have been ignoring Bilbo. They've been treating him as if he's just part of the group. He's nothing special. And the fact that Bilbo points this out means that he has a sense of wanting to be treated differently. almost like a child going on a journey with adults and expecting that the adults will go out of their way to kind of check on him, make sure he's doing all right. But instead, the adults, the dwarves, are treating him like another adult, which is what he claimed he was. He was a burglar. He is capable of adventure. He does deserve to be part of this group. And so that's how they start treating him. And they also don't notice that Gandalf is no longer there. It says, so far he had come all the way with them, never saying if he was in the adventure or merely keeping them company for a while. He had eaten most, talked most, and laughed most. This is, I think, one of the most important little details that we are going to get in this chapter. It is something that sets up our expectations for the rest of the story. Gandalf was missing. We aren't sure if he's supposed to be part of this group or if he just happens to be with them now. This is important because from a reader's perspective, think about it. We have a group of dwarves who seem fairly capable, world-weary, aware of their surroundings, prepared for their trip. We have a hobbit who's trying to work his way into a role that he isn't too comfortable with. We know that the world out there is dangerous. Dragons exist. Monsters exist. Most of it is uncivilized. This group even put in the contract with Bilbo something about funeral preparations. Every sign has been telling us that this adventure is going to get dangerous. But if we can assume that there's a wizard with them every step of the way, able to solve whatever problems come up, then that takes away the tension. Tolkien was smart when he designed this part of the story. He was clever in letting us know that Gandalf was not going to be the deus ex machina who just shows up out of nowhere every single time there's a problem. Now, does he do that? Of course. He does show up and save them. We're about to see a situation where that does happen. But not every time. Gandalf is not going to be just a get-out-of-jail-free card on this adventure. He's not going to be the one who has to always do the heavy lifting and ensure the safety of the party. That is going to be something that eventually falls on Bilbo. And already, Tolkien is setting up the little details for this arc, for the adventure that is about to happen, for this story. And like I said at the beginning, so much of what he's revered for are the big picture things. And yet these little details like this show that he is a master storyteller. He's taken away the training wheels, so we know that this adventure isn't just going to be a piece of cake. Thanks for tuning in again this week. I look forward to chatting with you again next time, and if you're part of the Patreon, to chatting with you on our bonus episode in just a few minutes. I'll see you there. Thanks for listening to the Lord of the Rings Lorecast. If you'd like to learn more about other fantasy worlds, check out my other podcasts, The Elder Scrolls Lorecast, The Witcher Lorecast, and more at robotsradio.net. If you'd like to reach out, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a note on Twitter at robots_radio, or join our amazing community on the Robots Radio Discord. There are links in the show notes, or just search Robots Radio Discord, or find the link on robotsradio.net. I'll see you next time.